Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at designing websites. Designing websites is quite a deep process when you really look into it. Not only do you have to take into consideration all of the various elements and principles of design that we've been discussing up until this point, but you really need to consider the interaction that's going on. You have a dynamic type of media that you're creating, so there's going to be other issues that are going to come up, and we're going to look at some of those. What are we actually trying to achieve when we design a website? Well, I think that in most cases you want to create an interface that people are going to find genuinely enjoyable to use. A website, by nature, it's interactive, but it still holds a purpose and it must be used. Not only am I personally interested in how it's useful, but of course also how it's viewed, and I think they go hand in hand together. If something is pretty to look at, then there's definitely, in my opinion, more of a chance that people are going to want to stick around. My personal goal is to create interfaces that look great while engaging the user. The functional elements of designing a website, they should improve the experience of visitors, and websites should really make information easy to find, and functionally they should be easy to use. Website design serves many functions. It makes a statement and it facilitates the experience of the visitor. The main aim of functional design is to order information and website elements in a way that is easy to use. The functional elements of website design are simply to introduce and very effectively in terms of allowing the user to navigate through, and this of course will provide the user with an enhanced experience on that particular site. So how do you get to this point? Well, we're going to be discussing some of the various ways. I'm going to quickly give you kind of an overview of just web design goals that we want to be considering and just kind of hit upon the process quickly, and then we'll delve into some of those things a little bit deeper. When we create a website, it's creating an engaging website. It's as much about overcoming technical challenges as it is about creating an attractive product. What your site does, website designs are often presented as static images in the design stage, but by their very nature they undergo a transformation, and by the time the project is completed, then it actually is going to do something. So when you're designing with images, you want to make sure that you remain mindful of how the image is going to eventually work within the site. You want to consider the process involved in using a website. At its basic level, this means questions like, what is the major call to action for the site? What do we want to do here? This need is balanced with the more traditional design considerations. The more attractive an item looks, the longer people want to look at it. And if you design an appealing looking website, users are going to be more likely to receive your client's message, buy the product, engage in the community, or do whatever it is that you want them to do while they're on the website. Websites need to evolve the process itself. It involves planning, preparation, and this is going to take place over a period of time. The more planning and forward thinking you can do as a designer, the better. This is going to help you define specific goals, foresee any potential problems or technical hurdles that you might have to overcome, and you're going to progress through the creation process with these things in mind. The most common forms of research is finding out which websites the client likes and dislikes, and that's a really important kind of fundamental question that you definitely want to ask them. You want to ask them not only what sites they like or dislike, but why do they like or dislike a particular site. Try to get your clients to be as specific as possible. If the client can explain how their preferences relate to their own brand values that they're trying to portray, or the functionality that they want their own customers to experience, then you basically have a design brief, and you definitely need a design brief before you can start through the process. So this is going to help you to actually begin and get started. The structure of a site, it should come freely with as little restraint as possible. You want to really keep it loose initially, and you want to try to approach the task without too many technical concerns. They're definitely worth considering, but rather than worrying about specifics, it's better to simply diagram how the various sections will relate to each other and create a site map to begin with. You're going to need the sitemap so that you can plan accordingly the various components and elements that people are going to be using. Once you kind of have defined the site map, then you're going to want to really do some information architecture and find out about the user. You really want to delve deeply into this process. In some situations, there's going to be significant budget for information architecture, and in other situations that might not really exist. But either way, you have to do the information architecture. Basically, as the site plan kind of gradually evolves, you can begin focusing on specific areas and tasks, and you want to find out like what the key message should be. You want to find out what should hit the user when the site first loads. What is the primary call to action? How many pages are there going to be? That's going to be helpful to have your site map so you can really reference that and determine how many pages are going to be in the site. You want to think about what should be on each page, what elements should be on all the pages. So is there going to be something that's consistent? I mean, yeah, navigation is usually on all the pages. So what things change and what things are going to remain the same on all pages. You want to think about how each element is going to relate to the goals of the website. Each of these questions, they all relate to information architecture in terms of the web. Information architecture is basically a science of organizing information in a useful and logical manner. There are many people that are specific information architects, and that's all they do for a living. That's their niche. And then some people think that the designer should do the information architecture. Either way, you should be familiar with the process because it's going to help you get in touch with who the client is, not just who your client is, but who their client is, who the viewer of the website is. And this is going to enable you to be able to create a website that is much more effective for that end user. Once you've done your information architecture and you kind of have answers to questions, you're going to want to create some sort of wireframe. And wireframes are kind of like the blueprints for your design. They're not going to be heavily graphically intensive, but they will basically kind of outline various sections of the page and help you to get in a position to actually create the full-blown designs. The wireframes are kind of fun to do, and they can really be basic, but you just want to block off various areas and have brief descriptions about what is going to appear there. This will be a really helpful tool to use, and you'll want to do this once you've actually created a site map and sketched out just some other ideas. I mean, it's not like this just comes sequentially. This is kind of an overview, and we'll break it down. When you are creating a website, the goal of the visual style is to evoke some sort of feeling in the end user, and the feeling is going to tie in with the concepts and the values of the company or the individual that has the site and what they're trying to promote. Because we're dealing with imagery rather than words, our job is to convey that atmosphere in a almost kind of subliminal manner. So when you think of delivering this message, you need supportive elements so that the user can get through the site, and those things are going to be the navigation. Could very well be considered the most important thing on a website. Certainly the content is important, but if the navigation isn't there, then the content can't be found. So the complexity of the navigation system itself needs to be well thought out. Depending on how big and how deep the page linking goes, you'll have different considerations to think about how to best present the navigation. It's definitely an extremely important interactive element in a website. Now, navigation itself comes in many forms. The visual style applied to the navigation can signify type, or it can demonstrate a hierarchy to the user. It can be a graphical representation, but there's all sorts of different ways. You can make menus that collapse, that expand, drop-down menus. There's lists of pages, there's tabs, there's all sorts of different ways to present navigation. You want to ensure that the navigation it makes sense and that it is user-friendly. So that's going to be something that you need to focus on when you're designing your site. Style guides are certainly associated with brand identity and logo design in many ways, but you also want to make sure that the brand is carried across to everything that the particular business is using to promote themselves. So it's not like the website is going to look different from brochures and business cards. It should all have some sort of cohesive connection to it. And that is extremely important, because the more you can kind of brand your website and create a connection and a visual identity system, the more that people will start to identify those particular colors or those particular elements with your company. So when you're designing a website, you want to make sure that you take into consideration the existing brand, or if they don't have an existing brand, you might have to create that for them. But style guides themselves are kind of like page templates. They're going to be indications of how certain sections of the design can be applied in a particular medium. So applied to the page in this sense, regardless of the variable content that might appear. When it comes to interaction, style guides can also describe like the non-visual process. For instance, when you click a specific button, then a certain type of box should always appear before the page reloads or something like that. But it's important to be in touch with the style guides, and that will allow you to best create something that will support the rest of the branding elements that the company has, or that they maybe will have. So as we go through this section of the course, we're going to look a little bit deeper into the various elements of web design and some of the steps that you might want to consider as you go about creating a website.